Hello, everybody. Can anybody hear me? I'll just assume that you can, and I'll get started. What we're doing today is we're going to be working on a pull request for the Psake module, and let's get a browser window over here. I'm broadcasting at 720p, but my monitor is actually much larger, so I hope this is worth it because this looks absolutely huge on my screen. So we'll go to GitHub and we'll go to Psake, and we'll look at the issue that I filed, and this is it right here. So Psake is a really cool project. It's been taken over by Brandon Olin, who, if you're not familiar, Brandon Olin is Dev Black Ops. He's on GitHub and Twitter, and I'll just put his Twitter handle there in the chat. So look him up on Twitter. He's taken over the Psake module, and he's doing an awesome job with it. And one of the things that he's implementing that's new to the module is the ability to import tasks that exist in other modules. And this is going to be really cool because you won't have to write all of your Psake tasks for yourself each time in every single module. You'll be able to write the task one time in a single module and then import it into the other modules in which you want to use it. That's one win. And another win is that community members can write best practice tasks that the rest of the community can use. And some of these best practices tasks are going to include things like building a module, deploying a module, doing a lot of that kind of stuff. So it's going to be really, really cool to see how this plays out over time. But the thing that he's enabling here is really cool. But one of the things that I ran into was that the version check on the task where you're importing, the version check on the module where you're importing a task, right, is pretty strict. It's really strict. And I ran into a little bit of a bug where it was expecting a version of 0.10, and I had 0.11, and Psake was saying, nope, that's not the right version. And it's not wrong, it's just really, really literal. So I filed an issue, and he's letting me work on it, where I want a slightly less strict version check. I want to be able to define some bounds within which the version will be okay. So I want to be able to say something like anything 1.1, anything in the 1.1 series, so 1.1 through 99, whatever, anything in the entire 1 series, or if you really want, 1.1.1, then you can set the minimum and maximum to 1.1.1. And I didn't put it in the comments here, but I'm also going to implement it so that you can put nothing in there and just trust that it's the right version. We'll see if he goes for that or not. I don't know if he's going to like that yet or not, but I'll put it in there and we'll just see how it goes. So let's look at just real quick what it looks like, what the bug looks like. I'm not going to call it a bug, but what the thing that I ran into looks like. And to do that, let's look at another module that I was working on. Let's see, tugboat. Oop, that's not what I want. Right. So this is the Psake file for another project that I'm kind of sort of working on. It's just an idea. I've done almost nothing with it yet. But in my Psake file, where you would normally find a bunch of tasks, I have a task here called build, but I haven't defined it. And the reason is we're importing it from a module called PowerShell build. And I've specified here 0.10. And this gets back to the issue that I filed, where I've specified version 0.10. The actual installed version on my machine is 0.11, and so it said no. And I said, well, I'd really like to be able to just accept 0 and 1. And the way that we're going to do that is we're going to implement some new parameters into the task script. So this is task.ps1. I've forked and cloned the Psake project. So I have in my source directory, I have the Psake module, and in there is a file called task ps1, and that should look familiar, right? Because this is a function called task, and we have a whole bunch of parameters. And in the version that is in the development branch that that Brandon has, and let's just what is his branch called? Is it shared tasks? There, shared module tasks. Right. So he just has a parameter called version, and the comparison on version is simply implemented by saying, where is it? Where object version is equal to version. And that'll get the job done if you want a really very strict version check, right? What I want to do is something a little bit more complicated. And so I don't want to have the entire check inside here, inside this little script, right? I'm going to need to pull this out into a function because I want some more complex logic in here, and it's just not going to be clean to have it as an inline filter script. So instead, what I've done is you can see I'm adding a module, test module params variable, and it's a splatting variable. So I'm going to pass these versions, where the current version is the task module.version. Task module.version is coming from the fact that we've got a module that matches the from module, and the from module is this here, PowerShell build, that matches the name that's already imported into my session. And I'm just going to grab that module, and I'm going to say, okay, is the current version, well, here's the current version for the current version parameter. Excuse me, and here are my new parameters, minimum, maximum, and less than, and we'll get to why we need a maximum and a less than in just a little bit. But here is my minimum, maximum, my less than that were passed in. I'm splatting them, and now I'm going to do a where object comparison. My input object is the task module that I got earlier, because the input object will also end up the output object if the filter script evaluates to true. And just to kind of illustrate what I'm talking about there, and that's not the right one. Here we go. Can you even see that? I hope you can see that. I have a variable called hello string, or yeah, hello string, and it has hello world in it, right? Most people are used to using where object by piping a thing to it, and that's 99% of the usage for where object. You pipe a thing to it, and then you compare its properties. The only problem with it is, and this is kind of an aesthetic issue that I have with it in this particular usage, 99% of the time, again, I also use it by piping things to it. In this particular usage, though, I don't really want to have to use the $_ shortcut for the current object in the pipeline. I don't want to have to do it. It's not aesthetically pleasing to me in this particular case. What I want to be able to do is say, this is the input object, and if this other thing evaluates to true, then go ahead and pass it through. And so in this demonstration of it, I have hello string as my input object. My filter script is just going to return true. And lo and behold, out the other end, as output, I get hello world, right? And the idea here is that I've got all of my parameters here that I'm putting together, and I've got a function that is only going to return a Boolean. I'm not giving the entire module that we got from getModule. That entire module is not an input to this function, because I don't want this function necessarily to return an entire object. I just want it to give me a true false. So I use where object with that in there, and I'll get the module out the other end if this returns true. And if it doesn't, then I'll get nothing. And when you get nothing, some other bad thing happens out the end that might have to get addressed at some later point. Yeah, Glenn, it's probably not just you. Part of the reason that I'm doing this test is to figure out why the audio is choppy, or if it was going to be choppy if I did this from home. And you may or may not be able to hear me say this. Let's see. And given that I'm here, with my headset that works perfectly fine with BlueJeans, and that I had audio problems at Viewpoint as well with an entirely different audio source, I kind of think that the common denominator is my work laptop, which is really annoying. So just let me know in the chat if it's completely unreadable, if I'm just dropping out once in a while, what it sounds like. Am I understandable at all? Okay, so I'm implementing this, basically implementing this function. This is going to be the heart of it. So that really at this point, the work that I have to do in task.ps1 is pretty much done. I think the pattern up here is not to do a whole lot with from module version. Yeah, I'm going to need to add some parameter comments here, especially since I removed version. So let me put a to-do comment in here. To-do fix the help comments, and this will show up in my git diffs and hopefully remind me that I need. Oh, okay. That I need to fix that. So the git diffs will help me with that. We'll talk about testing later. I may or may not even get to testing tonight. The way that this module does pester testing is interesting, and it took me a little while to figure out. So we'll see if we even get there. Test module version.ps1. Okay, so in the private functions directory, I've added this file, test module version.ps1. I'm not doing a ton of parameter validation here. I'm not doing a lot of parameter decoration there because it's a strictly internal function that we're using in one place. I do want to comment it fairly well, just so that if somebody comes along later and wants to modify this, that in addition to the pester tests, they have a really good description of what the intended functionality is here. If they want to change it in the future, that's fine. But I don't want anybody to have any ambiguity about what I intended when I did this, and will hopefully, help them not make any breaking changes here. So I think in my begin block here, I want to do just a little bit of parameter validation. And the only parameter validation I have in mind at the moment is that I don't want maximum version and less than version passed at the same time. Minimum and max, minimum and less than, those are fine, but max and less than, I don't want those passed at the same time because they could cause a lot of ambiguity about which one you really want, and I don't want to make that decision for the user. You could make an argument that you might default to one or the other. I'd really rather not have to make that decision for them. So if I find that they're both passed at the same time, I'm really just going to kind of bail out and return false with an error. And so the place where I'm at right now is, how do you return an error in this module? And this is one of the things that you might, if you were just writing this script on its own, like, in your profile or in a personal module or something like that, that you wouldn't have to think too hard about. You would just say something like write error, write warning, something like that, to return something to the console, and you'd be done. Stop execution, you're good. In the Psake module, it's a little bit different because this module is really trying to be very, very proper in the way that it handles errors, and in the way that it handles error strings and that kind of thing. So when we look at line 204 here, we have a function called assert. right? And if we're going to assert that something is what? If this is not action, right? So if action is what, false, or if it's not present, or you know, something like that, we're going to return something from messages, and it's going to be this string, and you're going to format it in this particular way. And where that comes from is that, you know, some of you may not be used to dealing with modules that are designed to work well with internationalization and designed to work well with error strings that can be modified kind of from one, you know, specific place. But we're going to look at the Psake.psm1, and in here is a messages data structure, right? Convert from string data. And what we'll find is that this error right here is right there, right? And directly after this, we have import localized data, right? Binding variable, all this other stuff. So what we have here is a set of basically system messages that are local to the module, and they can be localized in a specific way, so that if somebody's using has some tools for internationalization, you know, you can modify those strings to return error messages to you, you know, in a way that you would expect. I'm going to be honest, I've never implemented internationalization. It's not like I know the details of exactly how this is going to be used. But the nice thing about working with a module like this is you don't have to know like every single little step of how this sausage is made to follow the pattern and implement it in a way that that Brandon's not going to hopefully have to go behind me and like redo everything, or, you know, you need to do this, you still need to do that, you know, yada yada, you know, to get this merged. Hopefully, you know, I'll have as much of that work done for him as possible. So what I want to do is, in my test version, if I have this problem, I need to return an error string, and it needs to be in that data structure, and it needs to be formatted in a particular way. So one of the first things I need to do is decide, you know, what on earth I'm going to call this thing, and I really don't know yet. So we're going to call this error what? Incorrect module version is equal to. I don't know why some of these have quotes and some of them don't. I'm not going to quote this. We're just going to say module version 0 was not within expected. No, not expected. Not within specified bounds. That's a good place to start. Nope, still not you. I'm going to close you. And let's go with, what am I? Oh, of course. Here. And we'll begin our check. And we'll say what? I think we had, I think this module uses a different sort of pattern for deciding if there is if a parameter has been passed in. I think most of the time we like to use PS bound parameters. But I think there was a different pattern being used. I want to, if there's a different pattern being used, I definitely want to match the pattern that's in the module. I don't want to be doing stuff that people looking at this code aren't going to be expecting. Okay, I'll just use PS bound parameters for now. Oh, not you. Save that. Let's do you. If PS parameters dot keys contain. That's what I'm looking for. Conversion and it's pretty long, isn't it? Contains maximum version. We'll see if we can deal with the length in just a little bit. And I'm not certain how to use this assert business properly. If not action, assert not action. Where's this assert business coming from anyway? Can I peek definition? Helper function for design assertion. The helper function by eliminating any of the if statements that are not required to verify assertions. Condition check is the Boolean. Oh, I can just assert false. Look at that. Or I can assert. Huh. No, it's just not quite the syntax I expected. And the failure message. Okay, so how can I adapt to that? Let's just take this part. We'll do assert not right. It does seem really long, doesn't it? I wonder if you can do, let's do this. Let's do right, not. Let's just do that, and then the message is going to be there we go. Messages dot error incorrect format will be current version dot toString. There's a good chance I don't have to call toString, that it'll probably be just called for me. But let's just do it anyway. We'll just and at some point we'll start running some tests to see if that works, and we'll worry about kind of cleaning up the syntax later. All right, so that's all the parameter validation I want to do for now. Let's start to process some stuff. So one thing I want to make sure is, let's go ahead and start with result is equal to true. And let's start to test some stuff. So minimum version. Want it to be greater than or equal to minimum version. Luckily, the version type has a comparison static, I believe. Equals, there we go. Equals, and we'll do current version, and we'll do minimum version. Let's look at the specs for that comparison. System.version. And I can never remember because it only returns like 0, 1, and -1 or something like that. Properties, methods, equals. Right. Returns a value indicating whether the version object is equal to a specified object. Perfect. Truth of version, no. Oh, I think maybe I want the instance. Maybe I want an instance method there. There we go. Compare to. That's what I really want. And minimum version. There we go. Not sure why my syntax highlighting is being annoying. Okay. So let's find the compare to. Do version. Not version. Compare to. Sometimes it's just faster to Google. Oh, I got the German version. That's great. Is Google giving me the German version? All right. We're gonna get an integer back. We're comparing to the version. We're gonna get an integer. Here we go. If it's less than 0, the current version is a version before. And I believe the current version refers to the object that I'm calling it from. 0 is are the same, and greater than 0 is a version subsequent. I always got to do this logic here. Compared to version, I want, let's see, the minimum version. I want this version to be greater than that one, greater than 0. So let's do greater than 0. Is actually less than or equal to 0, because here's the thing. I want, if it fails, then I want result to be false. Yeah, you see? So you thought it. I thought I knew where I was going with that, and in fact, I went the opposite way. Let's see. What do I want to do next? The next one I want to do is the maximum version. This is an inclusive one. So if current version dot compare to is maximum. So I want this to be a less than or equal to if the current version is a version before. I want it to be 0 or less than 0, so less than or equal to 0. By the way, if anybody can catch a flaw in my logic, by all means, let me know. because I'm kind of thick-headed and I always have trouble with this stuff. Current version not compared to, right? If that version is before, okay, greater than or equal to 0. So greater than or equal to 0, and we will say is equal to false. This is, I'm probably going to have to put some guards on here, by the way. Less than version is greater than 0. False. There could very well be some flaws in this logic already, by the way. But what I'm going to do is hopefully with some, when I get some tests rigged up, I can catch those flaws, which is the beauty of testing, of course, so that you can see if what you're doing is actually correct or not. Why am I getting, oh, there we go. What? By the way, so I just caught a syntax error here, not just because of the squigglies, right? But because notice this color, the color of this brackets versus this yellow brackets, right? And this one, now notice the mismatch of these colors here, right? And that's because of a plugin called bracket pair colorizer, I think is what, is this the one I'm using? Yeah, bracket pair colorizer, right? And it helps me catch errors like that one right there, and then again right there, so that I can figure out like exactly where those you know, those bracket pair errors are. Well, and because of this right here, like again, because of the colorizer, you can see really exactly where this stuff should be, and it should not be in there, right? So let's talk about less than version. I said we were gonna touch real quick on why we need both a maximum version and a less than version. You could probably, I don't know, you might be able to mostly get away with just a maximum version, but the question that might arise at some point is, let's say that I'm okay with anything that has a major version of 2, right? Anything in the major version of 2. I don't care about Y or Z releases. I don't care about, you know, feature and patch releases. I just want a version of 2. The easiest way to implement that is to say minimum version of 2 and a less than version of 3. And the reason that that's the easiest is because if you try to specify a maximum version that will catch anything in the major version of 2, it gets really awkward, because what do you do for large version numbers? You could potentially say 2.99.99, and that should, you know, mostly do your purpose, you know, fit your purpose, but it's really bulky. It's not clean. It's not correct, and who knows what version number somebody is going to throw at you, you know, that is not going to work properly with that criteria. So really the cleanest, easiest way to say, you know, anything in this major version, anything in this feature version, whatever, is to have a less than version parameter. You still want a maximum version parameter, right? Because if you are specifying something within a certain range and you don't want that kind of flexibility, if you really want a hard ceiling on the version, then you do want a maximum version parameter. So, you know, there really is a possibility that you want both. So you want to implement both anytime you're thinking about that kind of criteria. So that's why we've got those there. And then at the end of this, okay, so at the end of this, what we'll do is we'll do write output result. Right. This is kind of a bare bones, like almost a pseudocode kind of implementation of what this should look like. So with that in mind, what we might do, what we could do really is just dot source this file only and start to run just some manual validation on it. So let's just dot source this file, source private, and then test module version, right? And then get command test module version, right? I have it there. So let's do test module version. Let's just start to test and see if it's going to behave in mostly the way that we expect. So let's do current version 1.0.0, right? And I want a minimum version of 0.1.0, maximum version of 2.0.0, and see what happens. Oh, yeah, that's a thing. Let's just comment this part out for now. I'm just trying to figure out if this thing works really. Let's dot source you again, and let's test you again. Okay, false. And really, this should obviously be true. So my logic is messed up because that's what I do. I mess up logic. So let's go to. Let's go to. I always end up having to do this manually a few times to get this right. Conversion.compare to. So let's make a version object. Current is equal to version of 1.0. Right. Let's make a minimum is equal to a version of 0.1.0. Right, and let's do current dot compare to. I get a 1. Is a 1 really what I expected? That's a good question. So I wanted this to. What does a 1 correspond to? Greater than 1. The current version is a version subsequent. Current version is a version subsequent. So we're going to turn this into greater than equal, not Q. Not Q, not that. All right. What's this? Less than or equal to and less than, right? And let's see if that fixes us. Okay, we're still false. I don't know why I'm doing this in the integrated terminal, by the way. Is equal to 1.0.0. Version is all right. And let's put a maximum. maximum of 2.0. Let's do dot compare to all right. That's a -1. Oh, but I want it to be that way, don't I? It's the current version. All right, so let's go back to that. It's this is where it just was, though. So let's dot source it. Source private. Hmm. So what if I go back to some of these, less than version, and let's put a breakpoint less than version, right? What's happening here? So our less than version is 2. We can see it over there. Make this equal to 1. Then let's convert it. Oh, it never got converted. Look at that, it's a string. And so what happens now? Contains key minimum. Maximum. Still a string. -1. So really that comparison is a bug. Looks like the type accelerator is really not actually working. So let's switch it to version.new. Version new, and we'll do 0, and then let's see if that works. You just can't convert a string that way? I think you can, though. Come on, I know you can. I don't think this is actually going to work. Not sure if that's actually a good assumption or not, but we're going there. All right, so now let's see what happens, huh? Here we have a less than version. It is a string, and let's see. Oh, I know why. I know why. I'm getting bit by the types. Definitely getting bit by the types. Yeah, the problem is that I've specified as a string up here, but I'm trying to do this down here, but it's getting reconverted back to a string because this was already a string type, which is awesome. Which was awesome. So what happens if I do something really simple like this? I take care of that up here. Goodness, this is getting ugly. Oh, now I've got a version. Look at that. System.version. Can I clean this up a little bit? Not that much. But I can do... Which one am I experimenting with? Less than version. So let's just, what happens if I do this? Oh. Just for funsies. Yeah, I would like to restart it. Thank you. Good thing you don't crash all the time. Oh, wait. Right. Oh, yep. Good. Okay. So that's enough to do my conversion just right there. Now let's see what happens if I do... Right. And then let's do 0.0. Yeah. Do I still get a conversion? Yes, I do. Very nice. Yeah, so let's just go with that. Let's just go with that. Take you a string. You upload that. Oh. Let's get rid of our breakpoint, and let's just see what we get. Are you serious, though? No way. No way. Oh, well, that's not really what I want. Anyway. Right. So what are you whining about? At 81, character 16. Minimum version 1.4. Oh, well, current version. Is that really what it's complaining about? But it's not even a version. 81. Look at you. You're not even a version. That's why. You. Of course it's terminated. All right, so now I've got a version, and I can. Thank you. Let's get back to testing. Yep, that's true. So let's do 1.5. Should be false, right? 1.51. That's true. Minimum version of what? Let's do like something really. 1.5. 2. Less than of 8. Right? Hmm. Good, and then do maximum. That's interesting. Who failed? I think it's probably minimum. Probably minimum. So let's stick you here, then right. So, yeah, it's gonna be, I need it less than or equal to 0, don't I? Because this is gonna be 0 because they're equal. Ooh, still false. Darn it. Right. Okay, yep, you win. So what? It's on the maximum then. Current version. Certificate straight greater than, I guess. Okay. Maximum of 156. True. So now less than is broken. Greater than or equal to 0. There we go. But if I bump this down to 1.9.9, right. I think that's my actual logic. So I think what we're gonna do is we're just gonna stop here for the night because it is indeed getting a bit late. Let's push these changes up to my branch. So let's do this. What did I change? Oh, that's right. Psake PSM1. I did change that. And then task. Right. So source Psake PSM1 source task source private, not that one, but that one. So here's that. My prompt has started returning these things to me for some reason. I'm not entirely clear why, but all of this is here. I actually don't necessarily want this to end up on this branch right now, because if I stick it on this branch, then it'll end up in the pull request, and they'll be constantly running AppVeyor on stuff that they don't need to be running it on, and it'll show up for like review when it shouldn't. I'm just gonna branch Bill and do choose 268 version check whip. Branch, by the way, is it's a function that I have in my profile that it wraps a couple Git commands. It wraps creating a new branch with this name from the current branch, and then it pushes and tracks to my remote. So that's really all that's happening there. And what it does is it lets me create a branch and then push it and track it, just kind of all in one step. I don't have to worry about doing those as separate commands. We'll do commit. We will say add test function file, add another message here, add error string. Changed. Oh, there we go. Added params to test PS1. We'll push that. Look at the graph. Right. So what I have now is this is kind of a private branch that I have that's working off of this one. And then when I'm ready for, for Brandon to take a look at this stuff, I can start to merge that stuff back in over here, and it'll show up in the pull request where he can see it. But right now, this allows me to have kind of a scratch space where I can do kind of whatever I want, have things in intermediate states, and they're not going to be pinged with like emails and stuff that, the things need to be reviewed, and when really they don't. So I think we're going to call that a night for now. If you joined me while I'm coding, great. I hope it wasn't too boring. If you're joining me later and this is already done, man, it's probably really boring, but okay. So yeah, have a good night, everybody.